The massive chamber of Unity Point Station hung like a jewel among the stars. Inside, Captain James Miller fought the urge to clench his fists as yet another alien representative mocked humanity's latest safety protocols. The humans insist on triple-checking their reactor cores, rumbled Ambassador Rockfist of the mighty Kraxi Empire. His crystalline form sparkled under the chamber's lights as he turned to face the other council members. They waste precious time while true warriors would already be halfway to battle. Laughter echoed through the chamber. Miller noticed how the other species joined in. The tall, proud Sunstriders with their glowing skin, the heavily armored Titans, and even the usually quiet energy beings who floated near the ceiling. "We prefer our ships and crews to return home alive," Miller said calmly, though his jaw tightened. At 45 years old, he had spent enough time among aliens to know how they saw humans: weak, cautious, always planning instead of acting. The thick scars on his right cheek, earned while saving colonists from a plasma fire, meant nothing to them. The council leader, a towering figure with iridescent scales, raised a clawed hand for silence. "Captain Miller, while we appreciate Earth's contribution to galactic trade, you must understand our concern. How can we trust humanity to stand with us in crisis when you hesitate to even test your weapons in real combat?" Miller straightened his blue uniform, the golden Earth insignia catching the light. "We test our weapons extensively, Council Leader. We just prefer to do it without risking lives." More snickers filled the chamber, but they died quickly as emergency lights flashed red. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing a massive energy surge in the Carina Nebula. "By the ancient stars," whispered the energy being representative, their form flickering with concern. "The readings, they match the legends." The council leader's scales shifted from blue to a pale green. "The World Breakers, they're awakening." Miller watched as fear spread through the chamber. Even the mighty Kraxi ambassador's crystalline form dulled slightly. The World Breakers were supposed to be myths, ancient automated war machines left behind by a long-dead civilization, weapons so powerful they could crack planets. "We must send ships to investigate," Miller said, breaking the tense silence. "There are 3 civilian colonies near that sector." The Sunstrider representative's glow dimmed. "The colonies can be evacuated. Only a fool would approach such weapons directly. The brave Sunstrider fleet will provide cover for the evacuation," their ambassador declared, from a strategically sound distance. One by one, the warrior races, the ones who had just mocked humanity's caution, found reasons not to investigate directly. The Kraxi cited critical military exercises. The Titans mentioned reactor maintenance. The Sunstriders discussed strategic reserves. Miller activated his comm unit. "Earth Command, are you receiving this?" "Affirmative, Captain," came the response. "The Prudence and her support ships are ready. We've been monitoring the situation." Of course they had been. Humans always planned ahead, always prepared for the worst. It was why they were called cowards. Miller stood, his voice cutting through the Council's debates about evacuation zones. "Earth will investigate the energy surge. We'll send regular reports of our findings." The chamber fell silent again, but this time in disbelief. "You?" Ambassador Rockfist's crystal form vibrated with what might have been laughter. "The cautious humans will face what warrior races dare not." "Yes," Miller said simply, "because someone has to, and we're best equipped to do it carefully." "You'll run at the first sign of danger," sneered a Titan representative. Miller smiled slightly. "No, we'll gather data, analyze the threat, and find a solution. It's what we do." As he left the chamber, Miller heard the whispers. Let them talk. Humanity had been underestimated since they joined the galactic community. Their caution wasn't born of cowardice, but of a deep understanding that every life mattered. The Prudence waited in dock, her sleek form reflecting the starlight. She wasn't the biggest ship or the most heavily armed, but she was smart, tough, and built by people who believed in coming home. Just like her crew. Miller touched the scar on his cheek and smiled. It was time to show the galaxy what human courage really looked like. The command center of Earth Space Command hummed with focused activity. Admiral Thomas Parker stood before the main display, studying the swirling colors of the Carina Nebula. Behind him, dozens of operators worked at their stations, each triple-checking their data before passing it along. "Show me the Prudence's patrol route again," Parker said, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display. Red dots marked the civilian colonies near the energy signature. Lieutenant Wilson, a young officer with sharp eyes, adjusted the display. "We've plotted 3 possible approach vectors, Each one keeps the Prudence behind stellar debris for cover." "Good." Parker nodded. "What do the simulations say?" "We've run 50 scenarios," Wilson replied. "The safest approach gives us an 82% survival rate if we encounter hostile forces. The warrior races would call it a coward's path." Parker smiled. "The warrior races aren't here. They're too busy being brave somewhere safe." The door slid open, and Captain Miller walked in. The council meeting had ended 2 hours ago, and he'd spent that time reviewing every scrap of data about the world breakers that Earth's archives contained. "Captain on deck," someone called. "At ease," Miller said, joining Parker at the display. "The Prudence is ready, Admiral. We've installed the new sensor suite and loaded extra drones." Parker turned to face the room. "Listen up, people. The galaxy thinks we're cowards because we plan, because we prepare, because we value life." He gestured at the display. 3 colonies are at risk. While the brave races talk about strategic withdrawals, we're going to do what humans have always done: protect those who need protection. The room filled with determined nods. This was what Earth Space Command trained for. "Captain Miller," Parker continued, "your mission is to investigate and gather data. Do not, I repeat, do not, engage the world breakers directly unless absolutely necessary. We need to understand what we're facing." "Understood, sir." Miller pulled up his own datapad. "I selected the crew already." Every one of them volunteered. On the main screen, the Prudence's crew manifest appeared. Engineer Sam Rogers, the best at improvising with limited resources. Dr. Alice Wright, whose medical innovations had saved hundreds. Lieutenant Ben Foster, whose drone programming had won awards. Each crew member was chosen not for their combat skills, but for their ability to think, adapt, and solve problems. "The support ships Phoenix and Horizon will accompany you," Parker said. "They're loaded with extra sensors and drones. If these world breakers are as dangerous as the legends say, we need every piece of data we can get." Miller studied the mission briefing. The Prudence would lead, with the Phoenix and Horizon flanking at a safe distance. They'd approach using the nebula's dust clouds as cover, deploying sensor drones to create a detailed map of the area. Standard human procedure, careful, thorough, and dismissed as cowardly by the warrior races. "One more thing," Parker added, his voice growing serious. "The Titan Empire sent us a message. They said they're calculating odds on how quickly we'll turn and run." A low murmur of anger rippled through the room. "Let them calculate," Miller replied calmly. "We'll be too busy saving lives to care." The crew began their final preparations. In typical human fashion, they checked and rechecked every system. Each crew member carried backup equipment. Each ship had multiple contingency plans. The warrior races would have launched already, weapons charged, rushing to glory. But this wasn't about glory. This was about protecting 3 colonies full of innocent people. This was about facing an ancient threat with intelligence rather than brute force. Miller took one last look at the nebula display. Somewhere in that swirling mass of gas and dust, something terrible was awakening. Something that had made even the mighty Craxi and proud Sunstriders back away. "Prudence to all hands," he announced over the ship-wide comm. "Final systems check in 10 minutes. Remember your training. Remember why we're careful. And remember, being called a coward is better than having to write letters to someone's family." The responses came back quickly, professionally. This was a human crew, trained the human way. They might not charge in shooting like the warrior races, but they would get the job done. And they would do it right. The Carina Nebula stretched before them like a wall of colored smoke. Captain Miller watched from the Prudence's bridge as their first wave of sensor drones disappeared into the cosmic clouds. Beside him, Lieutenant Foster's fingers danced across his control panel, guiding each drone with precision. First drone reaching target area, Foster reported. His voice stayed professional, but his hands tightened on the controls. Data streaming in now. The bridge crew held their breath as the readings appeared on the main screen. At first, there was nothing unusual, just the normal energy patterns of a nebula. Then the sensors picked up something else. Energy spike. Foster called out. It's massive. Nothing in our database matches this pattern. Miller leaned forward. Show me. The display lit up with a pattern that made his blood run cold. Deep in the nebula, something was moving. Something big. The energy readings were off the charts, and they were getting stronger. Multiple contacts, Foster updated. I count 7 distinct signatures. They're huge, Captain. Each one is bigger than a Titan dreadnought. The comm system crackled. Prudence, this is Phoenix. Are you seeing this? Affirmative, Phoenix, Miller replied. Maintain position behind the dust cloud. Keep gathering data. The warrior races would have charged in by now, weapons blazing. But humans had learned long ago that understanding your enemy was more important than looking brave. Engineer Rogers spoke up from his station. Captain, these energy readings, they're similar to our quantum core technology, but thousands of times more powerful. If these are the world breakers, he didn't need to finish. Everyone had read the legends. Machines that could crack planets, left behind by a civilization so advanced they'd vanish without a trace. Drone 7 getting visual, Foster announced. The screen flickered, and Miller heard several crew members gasp. The world breaker was a sight from nightmares, a massive construct of dark metal and pulsing energy, shaped like a twisted cross between a spider and a battleship. Its surface rippled with patterns of light that hurt the eyes to look at. Now we know why the warrior races stayed away, Rogers muttered. Miller nodded grimly. The world breaker looked nearly invincible. Its armor would shrug off their strongest weapons like raindrops. A direct fight would be suicide. Sir, Foster's voice rose with urgency. The machines, they're forming a pattern. Running it through tactical analysis now. The display showed the world breaker's movements. They were spreading out in a precise formation, each one taking up a position that they're creating a kill box, Miller realized. Those positions will let them target every major system in this sector, including the civilian colonies. These machines weren't just weapons. They were planet killers, and they were waking up to continue their ancient mission. A message flashed on Miller's screen. The Sumstrider High Command, watching from their strategic reserve position light years away, had a suggestion. Retreat immediately. Area too dangerous for engagement. Miller ignored it. Instead, he watched the drone's data with growing intensity. The world breakers were powerful, yes, perhaps invincible in direct combat. But they were also machines, and machines had patterns. Rules. Limitations. Foster, keep the drones at maximum range. Record everything. Movement patterns, energy fluctuations, response times to stimuli. Rogers, analyze their power signatures. Look for cycles, peaks, anything we can use. What about the colonies, sir? Foster asked. The colonies have time, Miller replied. These machines are ancient. They're following startup procedures, running diagnostics. We can see it in their power patterns. They're not fully awake yet. The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, gathering data while staying safely hidden behind the nebula's dust clouds. The warrior races would have called it cowardice. Miller called it intelligence gathering. Sir, Rogers said after several tense minutes, I think I see something in their power signature. It's not much, but There might be a pattern we can use." Miller smiled slightly. This was what humans did best, not charging in blindly, but watching, learning, finding the small details that could make the difference between victory and disaster. "Keep gathering data," he ordered. "Every piece of information is a potential weapon. Let's show the galaxy why humans survive." The World Breakers continued their ancient dance of death, unaware that they were being studied by a species that had turned caution into an art form. 3 days had passed since the discovery of the World Breakers. In the Prudence's main conference room, Captain Miller studied the holographic display with intense focus. Hundreds of data points floated around him, each representing another piece of the puzzle. "Show me the power cycle analysis again," he said. Engineer Rogers nodded and adjusted the display. "Here's what we found, Captain. Every 6 hours, the World Breakers enter a brief maintenance cycle. Their shields drop to 98% strength for exactly 47 seconds. A 2% drop." Lieutenant Foster shook his head. "The warrior races would laugh at us for even noticing such a small weakness." "Good thing we're not warrior races," Miller replied. He pointed to another set of data. "Dr. Wright, what about the energy pattern analysis?" Dr. Wright, who had been studying the machine's strange emissions, stepped forward. "The World Breakers use quantum fields we've never seen before, but," she highlighted a particular reading, "they follow strict mathematical patterns. They have to. The energy involved would tear them apart otherwise." Miller smiled. While the warrior races had been mocking humans from a safe distance, his crew had been doing what humans did best: watching, learning, and finding patterns that others missed. "Sir," Foster spoke up, "incoming transmission from the Titan Empire." The message appeared on a side screen. "Our battle computers calculate your chances of victory at 0.001%. The honorable course is to accept defeat and retreat." Rogers snorted. "They're still trying to calculate with pure combat equations. They don't understand what we're really doing." He was right. The Prudence and her support ships had spent days launching probe after probe, gathering data that most species would consider useless. The warrior races wanted shield strengths and weapon yields. Humans wanted to know about maintenance cycles, energy patterns, and mathematical constants. "Look at this," Wright said suddenly. She overlaid 2 data sets, the maintenance cycles and the quantum field patterns. "There's a correlation. When their fields pulse at this frequency, the maintenance cycle begins within 10 minutes. Miller leaned closer. "Can we predict it?" "Better than that," Wright replied. "We might be able to influence it. A carefully timed energy pulse could force a maintenance cycle." The room grew quiet as the implications sank in. They couldn't destroy the World Breakers in combat. No one could. But maybe they didn't have to. "Foster," Miller turned to his drone expert. "How many of our special package drones do we have ready?" 26, sir. Each one carrying the modified quantum resonator Rogers designed." Miller nodded. Over the past days, while the warrior races sent messages about tactical retreats and acceptable losses, his crew had been building something new, something that only cowardly humans would think of. "Sir," an operator burst into the room. "The World Breakers. They're moving. Energy readings are spiking." On the main display, the ancient machines were indeed shifting formation. Their new pattern was clear. They were preparing to attack the nearest colony. "They're fully awake," Wright said quietly. "The startup sequence is complete." Miller straightened up. This was the moment. They could retreat now, like the warrior races expected. Or they could try something that only humans would attempt. "Launch the drones," he ordered. "Full spread, pattern delta. Time the quantum pulses exactly as calculated." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no dramatic speeches about glory or honor. Just careful, precise actions backed by days of preparation. "The Craxi ambassador is sending a message," Foster reported. "Only cowards would attack with tiny drones instead of facing the enemy directly." Send them our standard reply, Miller said. Foster grinned and typed. Thank you for your tactical assessment. The drones streaked away from the Prudence, each carrying a fraction of humanity's response to the Worldbreakers. They weren't powerful weapons. They weren't even weapons at all. Really, they were something far more dangerous, the product of human ingenuity, caution, and attention to detail. Miller watched them go, his expression calm. Sometimes, he thought, the bravest thing you could do was take the time to find a smarter way. The colony world of New Haven glowed blue-green in the viewport as the first Worldbreaker approached it. Miller watched from the Prudence's bridge as the massive machine moved with terrible purpose, its ancient weapons charging with enough power to crack the planet's crust. Colony evacuation is only at 30%, Foster reported grimly. They need more time. A flash of light announced the arrival of the Sunstrider battle fleet. 5 massive warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their golden hulls gleaming. Sunstrider command to all ships. The communication came through. We will show these machines how true warriors fight. Miller wanted to warn them, but he knew they wouldn't listen. The Sunstriders opened fire with their most powerful weapons. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes struck the Worldbreakers' shields. They might as well have been throwing pebbles at a mountain. The Worldbreaker turned, almost lazily, and fired a single shot. 2 Sunstrider ships simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris. They were simply gone, their atoms scattered across space. Get me readings on that energy spike, Miller ordered. Compare it to our calculations. Rogers worked his controls quickly. Pattern confirmed, sir. The weapon discharge matches our predicted frequencies. The remaining Sunstrider ships retreated, their golden hulls scared and darkened. Their brave charge had lasted less than 2 minutes. All drones in position, Foster announced. Ready on your command. Miller nodded. Everything they'd learned, every scrap of data they'd gathered while being called cowards, had led to this moment. Begin the sequence. 26 drones, scattered in a precise pattern around the Worldbreaker, activated their quantum resonators. Each one produced a specific frequency, carefully calculated from days of observation. Energy patterns shifting in the target, Wright reported. Just as predicted. The maintenance cycle is being forced ahead of schedule. The Worldbreaker's surface rippled with strange lights. The human crew watched intently, monitoring every reading. This wasn't a battle of weapons. It was a battle of mathematics and timing. Sir, Foster's voice was tense. 3 more Worldbreakers are moving to support the first one. Stick to the plan, Miller said calmly. Launch the second drone wave. More drones shot out from the Prudence and her support ships. The cowardly humans had built hundreds of them, each one prepared for this moment. The first Worldbreaker's energy patterns began to fluctuate wildly. The quantum resonators were working, forcing its maintenance cycle in a way its ancient builders had never anticipated. We're receiving a priority message from the Titan Empire, Foster said. Cease your pointless attacks and retreat while you can. Miller ignored them. How long until full effect? 30 seconds, Wright answered. Energy patterns are approaching critical variance. The Worldbreaker seemed to sense something was wrong. It turned its planet-killing weapons toward the drone swarm, but the tiny devices were too small and too numerous to target effectively. 10 seconds, Wright called out. The massive machine's surface began to crack, lines of light appearing across its ancient hull. The mathematical patterns that kept its incredible power contained were failing, disrupted by precisely calculated interference from the human drones. 5 seconds. The warrior races would never have tried this. They would have seen the drones as too weak, the power difference too great. They would never have spent days studying energy patterns and maintenance cycles. Now, the Worldbreaker shuddered as its quantum fields collapsed. For a moment, it hung in space like a broken statue. Then, with a flash of light that lit up half the sector, the ancient machine destroyed itself from the inside out. Silence fell on the Prudence's bridge. Target destroyed, Foster said quietly. No damage to the colony. No casualties on our side. Messages began pouring in from the watching alien fleets. Disbelief, shock, and confusion filled the communications channels. The mighty Worldbreaker had been destroyed not by superior firepower, but by careful study and precise calculation. Miller allowed himself a small smile. Send a message to Earth Command. First target neutralized. Proceeding with planned operation against remaining units. The Coward's Way works just fine. Around New Haven, 6 more Worldbreakers were approaching. But now, they faced an enemy they had never been designed to fight. Human ingenuity backed by patience, caution, and attention to detail. The Prudence's conference room was crowded. Representatives from 3 warrior races stood uncomfortably as Engineer Rogers explained the drone control interface. Their previous mockery had been replaced by awkward attention. The timing has to be exact, Rogers said, pointing to the display. Even a half-second delay will ruin the resonance effect. The Titan commander, his metallic armor less shiny than usual, leaned forward. And you discovered this weakness just by watching. By studying. Miller corrected from his position at the head of the table. By taking time to understand instead of rushing in. 2 more Worldbreakers had been destroyed in the past 12 hours, using the same careful methods that had worked on the first. The remaining 4 had pulled back, as if the ancient machines were trying to understand this new threat. The Sunstrider High Command wishes to collaborate, their representative said, the words seemingly difficult to speak. We offer our fastest ships to help position the drone swarms. Miller nodded. The same races that had called humans cowards were now asking to learn their methods. On the main screen, tactical data showed the combined fleet, human ships surrounded by their former mockers, all working together. Sir, Foster's voice came over the comm. The Craxi fleet is requesting drone control protocols. They're saying, he paused, as if checking the message twice. They're saying our caution was wisdom, not cowardice. The warrior race representatives shifted uncomfortably. Admitting they were wrong didn't come naturally to them. Show them everything, Miller ordered. The more ships we have deploying drones, the better our chances. Dr. Wright pulled up new sensor data. The remaining Worldbreakers are adapting their energy patterns. They're trying to counter our resonance effect. Of course they are, Miller said. That's why we prepared 3 alternative attack patterns. He turned to the assembled aliens. When you plan carefully, you always have backup options. The Titan commander's eyes widened. You prepared multiple strategies, even before knowing the first one would work. Especially then, Rogers replied. Humans always have a plan B, and C, and usually D through Z. New alerts flashed on the screens. The Worldbreakers were moving again, this time toward a different colony. But now, instead of facing them alone, the Prudence led a fleet of ships from every major race in the sector. All ships, deploy drones in pattern beta, Miller ordered. Time your quantum pulses exactly as shown in the tactical display. Remember, precision beats power. The warrior race ships, once proud of their massive weapons, now carried swarms of tiny human-designed drones. Their crews, who had once laughed at human caution, now carefully checked and double-checked their timing sequences. Enemy units entering range, Foster reported. All drone swarms showing green status. Miller watched as hundreds of drones moved into position. The warrior races had learned quickly. Their ships maintained perfect formation, staying safely back while their drones did the work. Energy spiked from the targets. Wright called out. They're trying to adapt their shields. Initiate secondary resonance pattern, Miller ordered calmly. As the Worldbreakers adjusted their defenses against the first drone pattern, the second one was already beginning its attack. The Titan commander watched in amazement as the ancient machines struggled against an enemy they couldn't simply overpower. This is how humans have survived all along, isn't it? Not through superior strength, but through superior preparation, Miller finished. Through studying our enemies, finding their patterns, and having multiple plans ready. On the tactical display, the World Breaker's energy patterns began to destabilize. The combined drone swarms, guided by careful human planning and now supported by the precision flying of the warrior races, had them trapped in a web of quantum interference. One of the massive machines exploded in a burst of light, then another. "Message from the Galactic Council," Foster announced. "They're officially reclassifying humanity's tactical doctrine. We're no longer listed as cautious to a fault, but as strategically sophisticated." Miller smiled slightly. "Tell them thanks, but we're a bit busy right now teaching the galaxy how to fight smart instead of just fighting hard." The remaining World Breaker's defenses were failing. Around it, ships from a dozen races worked together, using human methods to defeat an enemy that no amount of brute force could have overcome. The Unity Point Station's council chamber looked very different from when Miller had last stood there. The mockery and contempt were gone, replaced by something he'd never expected to see from the warrior races: respect. "The last World Breaker has been neutralized," Miller reported to the assembled representatives. "All civilian colonies are safe. Total casualties across all engaged forces: 0. The council leader's scales shimmered with what might have been embarrassment. "Captain Miller, humanity has taught us all a valuable lesson. We confused caution with cowardice, preparation with weakness. The Titan Empire formally requests human instructors," their ambassador announced. "Our fleet commanders need to learn this. Strategic patience." Miller remembered how they had laughed at human safety protocols just weeks ago. Now they wanted to learn them. The irony wasn't lost on him. "The Sunstrider Academy also requests training," their representative added. "We wish to understand how humans develop multiple strategies for a single problem." Dr. Wright, standing beside Miller, pulled up the final battle data on the main display. "The key was never about weapon strength," she explained. "It was about understanding the enemy's patterns and finding ways to use them against them." The display showed how the combined fleet had worked together in the final battle. Warrior race ships, once proud of their massive weapons, had executed precision maneuvers to deploy swarms of tiny drones. They had checked their calculations 3 times, just like humans always did. "We have another request," the Craxi ambassador said, his crystalline form glowing softly. "The Galactic Defense Council needs a new leadership approach. We nominate Earth to head the council." Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. The same races that had dismissed humans as cowards now wanted them in charge of galactic defense. "Before you vote," Miller said, "understand what this means. Earth's methods aren't exciting. We spend more time planning than fighting. We run simulations instead of charging into battle. We value caution over glory." "Yes," the council leader replied. "That is exactly why we need your leadership." Engineer Rogers, who had joined them for the council meeting, spoke up. "The World Breakers were just one threat. There will be others. The galaxy is full of dangers we don't understand yet. And that is why we must learn your ways," the Titan ambassador said. "You humans don't just survive. You survive intelligently. You find ways to win without sacrificing lives." Miller looked around the chamber. The mighty warrior races, once so proud of their strength and bravery, had learned that there were different kinds of courage. The courage to wait, to study, to plan carefully instead of rushing in. "Earth accepts the nomination," he said finally, "on one condition. We establish a new Galactic Academy of Strategic Planning. All races will share their knowledge, but with a focus on saving lives rather than glorifying battle." The agreement was unanimous. The warrior races had seen firsthand how human methods could defeat an enemy that brute force couldn't touch. "There's an old human saying," Miller added, "the brave may not live long, but the cautious never live at all." "We believe in bravery, but we also believe in being smart about it." The council leader rose, his scales now a deep blue of formal ceremony. "Let it be recorded. Humanity's so-called cowardice has saved us all. Their caution is their strength. Their preparation is their power." As Miller left the chamber, He passed a group of young alien officers already studying human tactical doctrines on their datapads. They snapped to attention as he walked by, not the reluctant respect they'd shown before, but genuine admiration. "Captain," Foster called from the Prudence's dock. "Earth Command sent new orders. They want us to help design the training program for the Academy." Miller smiled. The galaxy had finally learned what humans had known all along. True courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being smart enough to respect the dangers you faced, careful enough to prepare for them, and brave enough to face them anyway. The warrior races had wanted to be heroes. Humans had simply wanted everyone to survive. In the end, they had done both.